you know, the Monkees was, again, it was this imaginary band and the show was about these guys that wanted to be a band like the Beatles. And on the television show, if you watch it, we never made it on the television show. That was one of the important strengths of the show, is that we were always the underdog. We were always struggling for success. We were always trying to be successful. And we never made it on the television show. We were always trying to make it, and that was very important. One of the very important elements of the show is that we were struggling for that success. And I think that's why a lot of kids related to that, because there were all these bands out there in garages all over the United States trying to be like the Beatles, and the Monkees represented that. The core problem was that Mike and Peter were musicians that I think had been led to believe that when they were cast in the show that they were going to be able to express themselves musically. Indeed, that was not the case. They were not allowed to do so. It wasn't that we had a choice. We were not allowed to play, whether we liked it or not. David and I initially weren't as concerned about it, because even though I played guitar, my audition piece for the Monkees was Johnny Be Good. You had to be able to play an instrument and to sing to even get in the auditions. So they clearly had in mind they wanted people that really could actually do it. But what happened, I guess, early on is that the powers that be decided they just wanted to record and release pop songs. And it was a conflict even early on. Like I say, Davey and I weren't as concerned about it as Mike and Peter in the early stages, because we were actors essentially playing these parts. And I had approached the Monkees originally like, you know, Val Kilmer doing the Jim Morrison story, or going back further, Sal Mineo doing Gene Krupa, or something of that nature. I approached it as an actor, entertainer, playing the part of this character called Mickey, who was the drummer of this imaginary group on television. Well, it quickly became something else, and with Mike's help and with Mike's inspiration, we decided, as a group, we decided that we did want to start controlling the creative process of the music.
Here we come, walking down the street. We get funniest looks from everyone we meet.
Mike and Peter got very discouraged. Mike did really yell and scream. He got a couple of songs on the very first album even, and but it wasn't easy. And he started, you know, telling all of us, you know, guys, we got to band together here. We got to fight for our creative rights and blah 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 blah. And then when I started seeing the royalty checks come in for the songwriters, I thought, that's not a bad idea. And also, I was getting more into it. I was getting more into writing. I was getting more into the music and the performing. And so, very early on, we kind of put our foot down, and there's some infamous stories of the battles that ensued. And we said, either we write it all and sing it all and play it all, or we're not going to do it at all. And they capitulated, and the rest is hysterectomy.
For my money, Michael was very much interested in his own career for reasons of his own, which I'm not going to begin to guess at. But primarily, I think Michael saw the chance for the Monkees to take over their own music as I don't understand exactly. It might have been Michael actually, as a sidelight, did produce 2 cuts on each of the first 2 albums himself. And they were tunes of his own, and they weren't bad. And he did it in the professional way. He went to an arranger and had parts written out and gave them to the sidemen and had the studio cats come in and play the song. And then when we did Headquarters, he was in there with his guitar, and even with a pedal steel guitar, which I wish he'd kept up with. I would love to have seen that. And he joined us for that album. Headquarters was, in fact, the only album that we actually did make ourselves.
How good of musicians were you at that point?
Well, I had, 5 or 6 years of piano and taken French horn for a couple of years in high school and college, and played banjo and bass, and I had gigs as a bass player and a guitar and banjo player. I was a professional musician. Michael was a folkie, and he was darned interested in being, and he'd played guitar all his life. Mickey was a campfire guitar player. He was in a group. You won't believe this. Mickey was in a group called the Missing Links.
Yeah.
Before the Monkees. Before the Monkees.
Yeah.
You won't believe. Davey was no instrumentalist at all. But he's quite a musician because you don't get to be in Broadway musicals on Broadway if you can't do music. And Davey was the original Artful Dodger on Broadway. So it was everybody had some skills, but none of us was a really accomplished musician.
When it got down to the music, the problem is that in any band or most bands, there's one creative vision, usually a guy or a girl, sometimes two, but usually only one singularity of a musical vision. It's their idea, it's their songs, it's their music. And then they gather around them, friends, brothers, sisters, whatever, associates, musicians, that share that vision. That's how most groups work, and always have. In the case of the Monkees, there was 4 very distinct creative musical visions. Mike, who did and still does kind of country rock. Peter, who did and still does bluesy folk music. Davey, who did and still does kind of Broadway, Tony Newley kind of music. And I, who did and still do kind of rock and roll. So there's 4 of us. So whenever we had to make a choice of a song or a session or music or anything to do with the tunes, there was these 4 lead singers trying to form this group. And it was, and still is, to this day, difficult. Because there's 4 distinct musical visions trying to all kind of, when it does happen and when it does meld into something, it's really wonderful. But it's very difficult to do.
Hey everybody, welcome to part 3 of my Monkees album Deep Dive series. And today I'm going to be talking about their 3rd album, Headquarters. This was released on May 22nd, 1967, and would be the first album that the Monkees entirely play on. Everything you hear on this album, with a few exceptions, I think Chip Douglas plays bass on a few songs, but it's all organically the Monkees. Now, the Monkees had gotten rid of Don Kirshner after the debacle of the More of the Monkees album, and from this point forward, would assert creative control over their product. Now, it would start to kind of slip away as we moved into the latter part of the 60s. But for the rest of 1967, at least, the Monkees were in firm control of their musical product. So, how is the album? I think the album sounds better than really you would expect it to, considering you had 2 very negligible musicians in Mickey Dolenz and Davy Jones. But certainly, Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork were very accomplished musicians and pretty much carry the balance of the musical output on this record. And, certainly I always wondered what would this album have sounded like if they had used studio musicians. The Wrecking Crew might have sounded a little bit better, but I still can appreciate the garage sound of this record. You've got a band kind of finding their way, gelling over the course of the album's, 12 tracks or however many it is. So it's kind of got a charm in that respect. You've got this band of musicians who, they played together on the road, but they never actually got together in a recording studio and started building up these tracks from scratch. So in that way, I think it's a very enjoyable record. And I think the songwriting, the song selection on this record is, for the most part, very, very well done. And I love, these are some of my favorite songs on any Monkees album here. So let's get into the songs on this album. This is my stereo copy. This is my mono copy. And I've got a Rhino reissue with those lovely hype stickers that they slapped on all of the Rhino represses, which I love. It gives you a very brief thumbnail sketch of the album. a little historical information. So anyway, let's get into Headquarters. So the album opens with You Told Me, and we got a little bit of studio dialogue at the very beginning, kind of a goofy count-in, which I love, kind of reminds you a bit of Revolver. And I wonder if that wasn't, I think it might have been a little bit of a nod to the Revolver album, how it starts with Taxman, and you have that count-in. The song itself is absolutely amazing. One of my favorite Mike Nesmith songs of all time. It's very much jangly, guitar pop, but they perform it so well. Even Mickey, and you can tell, Mickey's drums are just slightly better than Paul McCartney's drums, from the McCartney album, or Meg White's drumming from the White Stripes. But you know what I'm saying? It's passable. They're a little bit stiff. But again, Mickey Dolenz did not play the drums before he joined the Monkees. So he had a crash course before they went on tour in how to drum. So to his credit, I could not, I'm going to sit here and tell you, I could not, and I challenge anybody else to perform as well as Mickey performs on this album, having just picked up the drums. So to his credit, I think he does a fine job. The next track is a Tommy Boyce Bobby Hart composition, I'll Spend My Life With You, which has, I think there's an early version of this, which they tried on the first album or second album with the studio musicians. It has very much a different flavor. This has got some pedal steel guitar. It's a much more countrified arrangement on this particular song, which I absolutely love. Could have sounded like a Mike Nesmith original, really. I would have believed you if you told me Mike Nesmith wrote this song, but I do enjoy it. And I think Mickey sings it as Mickey Dolenz only can tackle a vocal like this. Just a great Mickey vocal, and they perform it very well. Then we have Forget That Girl, which was actually Chip Douglas. I should back up a little bit and say Chip Douglas produced this album. He had been a member of the Turtles, I believe, for half a minute. And then he went into producing. And so he wrote Forget That Girl, which has got a Davy Jones vocal. And in terms of Davy songs, I think it's one of the better ones. And this sounds really well. This sounds almost like studio musicians performed this song. But it's a ballad, but not an overly sugary sweet Monkees ballad. And I think it's a great one. Kind of picks up a little bit during the bridge, which I enjoy. The next track is Band 6, and when I first heard this album, I had no idea what the hell they were playing, and then I found out later they were trying to play the Warner Brothers theme from the cartoons, that you would see at the beginning of every Warner Brothers Bugs Bunny cartoon, and then I'm like, holy shit, that sounds nothing like it. It sounds like if you got a group of musicians together and asked them to play the Warner Brothers theme using their feet, you might have what this song approximates. It's really, I gotta say, having given them credit for their musicianship on this album, this song's terrible. It just is. But, credit that they threw it on there. I'm sure they knew, this is awful. And it just goes to show how, much we had to develop as musicians, but it's still a fun little song. I'd rather have it there than not. It's sort of like one of those goofy White Album tracks that they stuck on there that wouldn't have made it onto any other Beatles album, but fun little song. Then we have You Just May Be the One, which is a Mike Nesmith composition. The version of the show, the version of the TV show, is very different from the arrangement on this album. In fact, Michael's vocal phrasing is even very different. TV version, he says, and you just may be the one. But on here, it's like, and you just may be the one. So it's very different the way that he sings this particular song, but it's a very cool Mike Nesmith composition. You know, again, a little more kind of folk country style. I could see the Byrds covering this song, but it's another great Mike one. Then we have Shades of Grey, which is a Barry Mann, Cynthia Weil composition. It's sung by Peter, so automatically the bar is lowered. You know, it's all right. It's trying to be like the 60s anthem, you know, sort of like a poor man's version, I guess, of In My Life or one of those style songs. You know, it's probably one of my least favorite songs on this album. It's all right. I mean, Peter, in spite of his vocal limitations, he sings it with earnest, and I'll just leave it at that. It's a fine song, but, you know, one of the weaker tracks on here. Then we have another Boyce and Hart composition. I Can't Get Her Off My Mind with this tack piano. I love this song. I do, having given Davy Jones and his material a bunch of crap on my channel. I gotta say, there's something about this Tin Pan Alley style that Davy, employs, particularly on this song. I'm a sucker for it. I know there are people who probably consider this their least favorite album, but it's got very sparse drumming. You know, it's got this ticky-tack piano, which I'm a sucker for. I love this song. I think Davy sings it well. One of my favorite Davy Jones vocals. It's one of those guilty pleasures of my favorite Monkee songs. Then we go over to side 2, and most people heard the first track, For Pete's Sake, as the closing credit song for season 2. This is a Peter Tork song that he co-wrote with Joey Richards, but it's a great song. It kicks ass. Now, in terms of 60s themes, they nailed it. It's a great track. Peter Tork, for all his vocal shortcomings, when it came down to writing songs, he could write some incredible songs. Do I Have to Do This All Over Again from Head, as a matter of fact, is one of my other favorite Monkee songs. But For Pete's Sake is just great. And yeah, the drumming's not amazing. And, you know, they're a little bit clumsy in terms of how they perform this song musically, but I don't care. It's a standout track on here. I absolutely love For Pete's Sake. Then we get Mr. Webster, which is another Boyce and Hart track. Again, this was tried earlier during the first 2 album sessions with a different arrangement. This one is very much more stark, more sinister, in keeping with the tone. It's basically the tale of somebody who has toiled his entire life for a bank. They've treated him like garbage, probably paid him, a pittance. And so he's been abused by his employer all these years. And at his retirement party, he absconds with all the money in the bank, or he takes a bunch of the money and, presumably he flies, overseas and spends his retirement living off of this money that he's stolen. But, anyway, the lyric aside, it's a very cool arrangement. I love the way that it stops, like towards the end of the song, and then it picks up again. Great arrangement, great song, great Mickey vocal. Absolutely love that one. Then we have Sunny Girlfriend, another top-notch Mike Nesmith composition, again with the jangle pop, which I love.
She owns and operates her own sunshine factory.
Some country rock here, but not overly country. Very cool song, great Mike vocal. One of these absolutely brilliant mid-60s rock songs from the Monkees, so they perform it excellent. Then we have Zilch, which I guess it's an experiment in some sort of like pre-rap rap. I don't know. I'm not sure what they're going for here. They're trying to like layer their vocal acrobat. I don't know even what you would call this thing. Zilch. It's a song that they put on here. The Monkees are starting to try and put, some sort of goofball novelty song on each of their albums, starting with this one with Zilch. You would get Peter Percival Patterson's Pet Pig Porky on Pisces Aquarius. And on subsequent albums, there would be some kind of jokey song that they would stick on here. So Zilch, it's a skip over track. It really is. Then we got No Time, which is a group composition with Hank Sicolo. I don't know how you pronounce his name anyway, but, it's nice to see a four-way credit on a composition, but it's a great up-tempo rock song. And the Monkees, Monkees were putting out songs that were competing with some of the best songs that they've been given on the first two albums, and how they progressed as songwriters, considering, with the exception of Mike Nesmith, I don't know if Peter Tork wrote any songs before the Monkees, but it's really, the fact that they came up with songs this solid is, to me, really impressive. But I love No Time. It works great on the TV show. Then we have another Diane Hildebrand song, which is way better than that piece of shit song, Your Auntie Griselda, that she gave to them on the More of the Monkees album. I love Early Morning Blues and Greens. Again, the Davy songs on this album are my favorite Davy Jones songs. They're not, that crap that we would get on, starting. I felt like it all started with Birds of Bees and the Monkees, where we got that unlistenable Davy Jones, stuff that I cannot stand. But anyway, I love the Davy Jones songs on this album. Early Morning Blues and Greens is great. You got that electric piano, a lot of great keyboard work on here. Mickey's drumming is fine. The arrangement on this is absolutely great. I'm in love with this song. I think it's so cool. Then we have a Mickey Dolenz, one of Mickey Dolenz' finest composition. This is a solo Mickey Dolenz composition. Randy Scow's Git, which apparently is some sort of derogatory slang in the UK, which he picked up when they were overseas on their UK tour. I think they made them change it to alternate title over in the UK, but a great Mickey song, and it's so diverse. You got opening up with that timpani on the drums, and then you got the little piano, and it's a bouncy tune. Oh, happy-go-lucky bouncy tune. And then you hit that chorus, and it is total acid rock. It's like punk. It's early thrash. It's so cool. The juxtaposition of the choruses, and then the verses, then the chorus, heavy, light, heavy, and then you get the timpani again as the song fades away. It is a brilliant, one of the most inventive songs that the Monkees would come up with. And I give Mickey a ton of credit for having the guts to write a song this sophisticated. So that is my take on this great album. I've always thought of it as my favorite Monkees album, but that, it varies depending on what kind of mood I'm in. But anyway, that is Headquarters. That's my deep dive. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section, and take care.